So welcome everybody to GeogLive 29. Just wait for the, there we go. So we're looking tonight at designing your curriculum. Okay, Anthony, please.
If colleagues could let people in if I don't spot them in the background, because forgive me, I might not be able to do that at the same time. So there we go.
Okay, so I'm Kate Manville, so I'll be chairing tonight. We were also going to hear from Steve Rawlinson about primary geography. Then Julia and Paula will be talking to us about designing a curriculum, as will Helen and Sharon. We also have our members of the GeogLive team in the background. And please put any questions or comments in the chat. We will be monitoring that throughout, so please do ask us if you have any questions. Also, if you'd like to tell us where you're from, we like to hear where people are joining us from this evening, so please do put that in the chat as well. We are recording, the recording has already started, and we'll be posting this onto YouTube later, as all of the other GeogLives have been uploaded to YouTube as well, so you can catch up on the other 28, that sounds an awful lot, the other 28 GeogLives on YouTube as well. If you could turn your cameras off for the moment, please, and put yourself on mute, unless you are presenting, obviously. We have our links, our social media links on X and Blue Sky, so please do have a look at those as well. And then the QR code to access those is there. Okay, next slide, please, Anthony. Please do remember that our contributors today are sharing their ideas freely with you, but if you are going to use it, please do acknowledge where you have found this information from. And copyright is residing with the Early Years and Primary Phase Committee and with the contributors who are sharing that. Next slide, please, Anthony. And over to you, Anthony, as well.
So right at the end, I'm going to be asking for any volunteers to perhaps blog about what we're talking about today. So do scribble down my email if that's helpful, if you're not able to stay towards the end. We are recording this, but it's really good to try and broadcast any thoughts and views about today. So do get ready to put something in the chat as well about what you thought about what we are presenting. So back to you. Just one other thing to mention as well, there's been a report published by the Geographical Association over the last couple of weeks, which is on standards in school geography over the last couple of decades from Ofsted, and it tried to answer these 4 questions. So this has been written by a range of people within the association. The big question that they try and answer is, have standards in school geography improved in the last 3 decades? And if so, how? And there's a cautious answer of yes, there's a cheerful yes at the end of this report. So the QR code will take you to the whole report. It's well worth looking at that. It's well worth, if you're a subject leader, considering how you might consider this longer view of standards in school geography from the various HMIs, various school visits that have happened and the reports that have come from those visits over many, many years. But of course, it does then say, in spite of advances, these improvements have not yet been secured in all schools or for all learners. So the recommendations, which are perhaps important for us to bear in mind as a subject community, recommendations for you in school, perhaps are worth just looking at before we kind of move on, that we need regular subject reviews from the inspectorate or beyond, and having the internal subject leadership and the capacity, important aspect to consider. We need to perhaps consider the self-evaluation criteria for geography, which might support a subject leader's role as a partner in raising standards, and to perhaps, this is the recommendation at least, to extend the scope of subject reviews from the inspectorate to include evidence for diversity and inclusion. So a worthy report just been published by the Geographical Association, helping all teachers of geography across early years, right, Stage 5 and beyond, everybody that is looked at by Ofsted. So recommended reading for you all. And there's just a couple of other ideas there that I'll give you a moment to glance at in terms of the conclusions that they come to in terms of the curriculum reviews that they've done in our subjects. We are a complex subject, a physical and human systems subject. but there are not enough examples of CPD, few opportunities to engage in CPDs. That's why subject association, like the Geographical Association, is so key. So do join, do consider your membership, and we look forward to working with you over the next year to develop your curriculum. One final thing to mention, alongside the journals and alongside membership that you might be aware of, there are free opportunities to gain more expertise from GeogPod. If you've never come across GeogPod, it's a free downloadable podcast. You don't need to be a member to have a look at this. And the 4 QR codes you can see on the screen that you can look at now, or maybe look at later on when you watch this back, will take you through to the primary specific ones. There's been lots and lots of these over the years, but these are the primary specific colleagues that have spoken.
Thank you, Anthony. So passing over to Julia and Paula, who are going to talk to us about curriculum design.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for coming to GeogLive this afternoon. It's always lovely to see so many people joining us. Paula and I are talking about curriculum design this afternoon. It is only an introduction. We've only got 25 minutes at the outside. So what we want to do really is to give you a sort of an introduction, a taster to some of our current thinking. And obviously we have been doing a lot of thinking in the last week since the curriculum and assessment review was published. We think this does give us quite a clear steer about some of the features that might change in the primary geography curriculum, and how the process of review and renewal might, what shape it might take, ready for implementation in September 28. So what we're hoping is that today we can give you some basic principles which hopefully will be important regardless of any specific particular curriculum changes we get through this or any other review of geography in the national curriculum, but also a sense of the direction that we seem to be going in as a result of the curriculum review. So just to introduce the curriculum review, if you could move on to the next slide, please, Anthony. Yeah. So the curriculum assessment review, chaired by Becky Francis, was published last week, and there is a statement of the principles that they were working with, all of which, of course, do have significance for us in primary geography, as they do for the wider curriculum in primary schools and also in secondary schools. So many of the features of this are things that were trailed long before the actual review was published. Some of you will be familiar with them already. So the first one is the notion that the curriculum is an entitlement for all children and young people, and an aspiration that it should be aspirational, engaging and demanding for all young people. And I'm sure you're aware that the bill going through the House of Commons at the moment will make the national curriculum part of the entitlement of children in schools in academy trusts, as well as in local authority maintained schools. There is an aspiration that the curriculum will remain knowledge rich, but a definite acknowledgement in the section on the knowledge rich curriculum in the review document that the knowledge needs to be well integrated with the skills in each subject and at each stage. So that obviously is important and something Paula and I will be talking about later on. The same sort of idea in relation to curriculum depth and mastery of core concepts. One of the things that was in the Ofsted review that was published 2 years ago in October 23 was a suggestion that in many schools the core concepts were not well enough integrated into the geography curriculum planning and the learning for the children. And this is an idea that is reflected in the front of us, building a world-class curriculum for us all. So I think we should all expect to see more emphasis on building in core concepts throughout the curriculum in the future, and also more depth. And one of the ways that it is suggested we might achieve more depth while retaining the breadth of the curriculum, and remember we're talking about whole curriculum here, not just geography, is by removing some repetition of the content, but none of the details of that are yet proposed, so we'll have to see how that unfolds. But there are areas of which perhaps are repetitive in geography between Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, and we might see some shift of content there. We'll have to wait and see what the people drafting the new programmes of study suggest. Again, there's a very strong emphasis on the idea of curriculum coherence, especially through progression in the core concepts and in the selection and ordering of the material to be taught. We'll come back to that later on. There's a suggestion, which many of you will recognise, that in some subjects, especially the foundation subjects, there is a need for more specificity in what should be taught at what stages, partly because as we all know, Key Stage 2 is very long, and what you might teach Year 3 children about rivers would be very different from what would be appropriate in Year 6. So there is a suggestion that there should be clearer guidance around that to support teachers, and that the programmes of study should set out, and I'm quoting now, the essential substantial knowledge and skills children should have acquired by the end of the key stage in each subject. Again, we'll have to see how that pans out in reality. There's a big emphasis on professional autonomy, which I'm going to come back to in a minute because it relates to what Paul is going to say next. And finally, there's something which I think will be very welcome in geography, an emphasis on a curriculum for all, and an emphasis that the curriculum should reflect the diverse society in which we live and the diverse world in which we live, and that it should, and again I'm quoting, allow more children to see themselves in the curriculum. Professional autonomy, there is a clear statement that the changes that are to be suggested in the review and consultation process should leave teachers and schools with sufficient flexibility to respond to their own particular circumstances, the school community, its location, the children in the class. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Paula because she is now going to move on to talking about curriculum making.
Thank you, Julia. Next slide, please, Anthony. I'm going to pick up on this point of, good afternoon, everyone, by the way. I'm going to pick up on this point that's really quite key, I think, of teacher autonomy and come back. I've lost the slideshow, Anthony. Is it still there? Oh, there we go. And talk about this diagram from the Geographical Association about curriculum making, because if we're going to have some autonomy, then hopefully it will be a time to encourage us all to think about how we can remake our curriculum with those vital tweaks and adaptations, not changing it entirely, because this is just tweaking at the edges allegedly, but there will be some things to change quite profoundly as well. So what do we mean by teacher autonomy and curriculum making? And in this diagram, we can see that it's this interaction between what the children bring to the equation, what do they bring in their becoming knowledge of being geographers, and what do they need? What is the context of what do they need to have in that curriculum to benefit them as well? How can we adapt that curriculum to best serve pupil interests? It's about the powerful vision that the geography subject has in the curriculum. So what will it do in your curriculum? How will you empower it to take those children further? And what's the purpose of that subject within the wider scheme of things? So the vision is a very important part of that equation. And about the teacher choices that we make as teachers, we decide what content we're going to select from that curriculum and how we're going to teach it. And we decide how we're going to sequence it, how we're going to revisit it or not, how we're going to assess it, how we're going to build in that progression. So that content mixed with the pupil need and the power of the subject is really a key dynamic at the heart of our curriculum. So let's just focus on that and the opportunities that it brings. Thank you, Anthony. Next slide. I'm just briefly going to mention this. Wherever possible, Julie and I have tried to link to existing materials and articles from the Geographical Association. And this is an article from Primary Geography from Alan Kinder and myself about intent, implementation and impact. And it's a broad overview of how this impacts on our curriculum, about us thinking about what it is that we want to teach, what's the vision for the subject, how we're going to do it, what do teachers need to do it well, and about that impact it's going to have, is it working, and how do we know? And curriculum making, again, is something that is at the heart of these interactions. I'm going to go over this quite quickly because we've got quite a bit to get on to. So next slide, please, Anthony.
This is back to me, back to the curriculum assessment review. We're coming back to that curriculum making in a moment. Another thing that is important in the curriculum assessment review section called Preparing Learners for a Changing World. According to the report, this list of 5 applied knowledge areas was developed through consultation with stakeholders, including parents, children, employers, and so on. And all of them have implications for primary geography. So these are going to be 5 areas that should be integrated across the curriculum. Financial literacy is probably the one that has least immediate connection to geography, but of course there are connections through economic geography, things like trade. Digital literacy, of course, we're very strong on digital literacy and geography through GIS and the use of digital resources. Media literacy, the report highlights how important history is in helping children and young people to understand that different sources come from different perspectives. I would say that geography is equally good at that. So helping children to think through who created this source, why did they create it, who was the intended audience, from what perspective was it written. Those are things that we should be able to do very, very well when we're pursuing geographical inquiries. Education, climate change and sustainability. Geography is one of the 3 subjects highlighted as having a particular contribution to make in the curriculum in relation to this. The other 2 are science and DT. And then, of course, as primary practitioners, we all know that oracy and language are the foundation of all learning in geography, as in all subjects. So you can see there is a great deal of relevance to these 5 areas which are going to be more emphasised in the new curriculum for geography, specifically for primary geography. And apparently young people also asked repeatedly to learn more about more political knowledge through citizenship. So that, again, there is a link to geography through that, through how decisions are made about places and issues. And I'm going to pass back to Paula to talk about the geography specific recommendations now. Those were all general whole curriculum issues.
Thanks, Julia. Well, obviously those whole school curriculum issues are going to have a big impact on geography, not least bringing in a statutory citizenship requirement across key stages 1 and 2. We've yet to see the full details of that, but geography is a subject that lends itself well to working with citizenship because it gives that empowerment, that agency to applying that geographical knowledge in real contexts. Something that came through, not unsurprisingly, was a need to think more clearly about refining the content in our curriculum to demonstrate that progression is working, is in place. So thinking carefully about how we order and revisit things in the curriculum is of key importance. Julia mentioned key geographical concepts, something that has been picked up in the last subject report from Mark Henzer and has come up time and time again. And what this means is not teaching key concepts specifically to children per se as they are, but making sure they are embedded within that curriculum and they are embedded in such a way that they work together to bring forward the part of the subject, the disciplinary understanding of the subject, and that deepens understandings of children's knowledge and skills and values as it goes through. Fieldwork, not surprisingly, is something that again suffers a lot of criticism from Ofsted in many reports. It's slightly better, but there's still lots of work to do, apparently, especially at Key Stage 2. And this new review suggests that we need to clarify and strengthen the way that it's embedded within the curriculum. Luckily, again, there is some documentation from the J that will help you enormously, not least a fieldwork progression article that Julia will talk more about later on, and how to embed that progression in fieldwork into your curriculum. I think the biggie that we're all really, really pleased about is that climate education and sustainability has found a home in geography. Although ideally, of course, it will be represented as a context across the curriculum. It's in science as well, and sustainability is in DT. But because, as the report says, the geographical curriculum, the geography curriculum is the home of weather and climate, it's a natural home for that understanding, that knowledge, and thinking about the impacts of the human environmental interaction, human physical worlds. So we need to think from, it says from the earliest years as well. So building on that from foundation, thinking about how we can get this early coherence, or a joined up approach and more detailed engagement, something that links with citizenship again. Julia's mentioned that it needs to be more relevant and inclusive, particularly in geography, but that's a whole curricular thing as well, showing how learners can see themselves represented in that curriculum. And I've just put that quote there. I think that's a really lovely quote. Empowering the next generation of geographers to understand and tackle climate change through suitable climate education, which is a very exciting challenge for us to take on in the geography curriculum. Thank you, Anthony. Sorry, this is me as well. And continuing with this, just to say that the GA has got lots of resources to support you with planning for climate change in the curriculum. And coming soon, there's a new In the Know pack, knowledge about climate change, and a new CPD pack about how to implement it across your school. And just a little message here about, let's not forget, it's not just the knowledge, it's about how we teach it as well. Pedagogy has an important role in applying and engaging climate lens to our existing curriculum content. So thinking about that particular power of geographical lens and how we can think about how we teach it and the kind of skills we need to develop. And as you know, the green skills, something that Geographical Association is leading on through its publications at the moment.
Right, it's back to me now. So I just want to refer back to the Ofsted report, the last Ofsted report published just 2 years ago now, and the way it thinks about, or the way it describes types of knowledge, because this is the language that's being used in the review document as well. So the substantive knowledge is what we would think of as the content, the knowledge and understanding of places and their location, physical and human geography features, of geographical processes, and of course those core concepts. Procedural knowledge is described by Ofsted, or thought of by Ofsted, as how to use geographical skills. So there's very much an emphasis on the use, the application of the skills of inquiry, making, using maps of all sorts, field work, using a variety of source information, data collection, analysis, critical thinking, all that really important area of skills, which Paula and I are coming back to later on. Finally, disciplinary knowledge, and this, of course, is how geographical knowledge is created, formed, debated and contested. And I think for us in geography, the inquiry process, which we're going to talk about in a moment, is a very important way that we can help children understand that geographical knowledge is not just something out there, but it is actually created by the process of inquiry that we can all engage in, whether it's inquiry through fieldwork or inquiry through the use of secondary sources of some sort. Thank you, Anthony. Next slide for Paula.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about these key concepts. Now, arguably, there are lots of different interpretations of what these key concepts or ideas are. And geography is a complex subject and it has lots of key concepts. But arguably, at the heart of basic, good quality geography are these kind of three or four concepts: place and environment, often used interchangeably, although place, of course, has meaning, and humans are given a meaning to a place, scale and space. So how do we think about planning that into the curriculum and building that progression in? Well, if we think about place, it's about developing that idea of understanding what place is like by recognizing features, being able to describe it, going on to deepen that understanding by thinking about what happens here, about the processes that take place, how and why is it changing. But it's also about thinking about the sense of place, that interpretive sense of place. So as well as that core knowledge, we absolutely need to understand how we feel about it. How do others feel about it? That's where the critical thinking comes in being able to differentiate facts and opinion, of course, and having the ability to compare places. We need to bring scale into the equation because places and spaces and environments change at different scales as you zoom in and out, and they're all connected. So perhaps in the early years, we start working at a local scale, and by the time we get to year 6, we're able to look at a range of scales. And the space is the ability to understand the spatial aspect of geography, which is where it is uniquely geographical. We could be doing some wonderful work on place, beautiful descriptive vocabulary, but unless we've got that spatial element, then it's not geography. So it's absolutely crucial, that awareness of place. Where is it? What is significant about this location? And how does it connect to other places? And this is all bound up in this inquiry framework. Thank you. Next slide, please, Anthony. Thank you. And just to highlight, these are some of the other concepts that we might be thinking about that Julie's already mentioned some of these. We've got climate change and sustainability themselves are concepts and ideas that we need to weave into the curriculum, as well as that knowledge, this context. social justice, time, change. You will see lots of these, and the Geographical Association has a document about concepts, which we feel is particularly helpful for secondary, but for primary, we need to think perhaps more simply in thinking about some of these basic understanding of concepts and how they interact. Thank you. Next. And so as we build this progression in this very simple diagram, we think about this spiral curriculum. It's not a straight line. We know that as teachers. There's lots of revisiting in different contexts that goes on so that we get this breadth of experience, but we also get this depth and complexity. And what we want children to do ideally through a well-planned curriculum is move from the local to global scale. Starting from the early years, we don't just start local, we think local and global, but it's perhaps at either extreme. And then by the time we get to the end of Key Stage 2, children are able to look at all those intermediate scales as well, and the complexity of different scales, regional scales, etc. We're also all the time starting with concrete and moving towards the abstract, and really good concrete experiences, particularly through fieldwork, will help children to develop that more abstract understanding. So more complex and moving from concrete to abstract. Next slide, please, Anthony. And we're also thinking about enmeshing these 4 pillars of the geography curriculum, which are locational knowledge, place knowledge, human and physical processes, geographical skills and fieldwork. These are not all separate strands, and we shouldn't, for example, be planning just how to teach skills out of context and teaching mapping skills separate from understanding of place or processes. Ideally, they are all woven together. We need a curriculum that has this coherence, that weaves these strands together as we think about planning in for that pitch, which is part of progression, think about how we're going to sequence it, and also at the very start of planning, how are we going to assess it? And all of this is, again, coming back to that curriculum making. Thank you, Anthony. Next slide.
And it's back to me now. This is about procedural knowledge, because as we said earlier on, and as Paula's just pointed out again, it's absolutely critical that we integrate the skills, all of the skills of geography, or the procedural knowledge, as Ofsted would have it, that we integrate them from the outset in all our work. So the last Ofsted review made a very strong point about the need for children to have opportunities to practice and apply these skills, not just to be taught them once and then to move on, but to have lots of opportunities to apply them in different contexts. So what your curriculum plan ought to do is to build these skills in from the early years through to the end of year 6, integrating them into all of the units of work. Now, not every unit of work is going to have all of these things, but every unit of work should have some elements of procedural knowledge in it. Later on, we're going to be talking about some frameworks for progression that already exist that would help you in thinking about how to develop that progression in some of the procedural aspects of geography. I think that's back to you, Paula. Oh, no, it's me. Right. So this is a framework that many of you will be familiar with. It's very widely used in Geographical Association publications. It's been through several iterations. The original one was certainly done by Paula and colleagues. And there's been a significant influence on it by somebody called Margaret Roberts. Margaret Roberts is a titan of geography education. She's a secondary teacher, but her work has been very influential, not only in this country and in primary as well as secondary, but internationally. She's extremely well known and her work is very, very highly regarded. And one of Margaret Roberts's key points is that if we want children to engage in inquiry, we need to give them a genuine need to know. So that is what you can see on the left hand of your diagram in front of you. A genuine need to know, which will create authentic learning opportunities where there's going to be a real audience at the end of it, a real purpose and real outcomes. So the actual inquiry process that we've got described here looks neat and tidy, but of course in reality, in real classrooms, it's an awful lot messier than this, and it might move around from one place to another, cut across the middle of the diagram, move back to some previous stage. But in general, this is a good description of the process that we would like children to learn to understand as one of the key geographical skills that shows them how geographical knowledge is created through the process of inquiry. So usually it would start by asking some questions and then deciding how to structure your inquiry moving on to doing the inquiry, actually maybe doing some field work, or maybe using pictures of a distant place to find out about the physical and human features of place, or using climate data to find out something about the weather there. Once you've found things out, of course, you need to sit and think and analyse about what you've actually found. And then we have communicating. And for me, actually communicating, deciding who we are going to communicate comes right at the beginning. So not just that we are going to find out about what should happen to that bit of spare land next to our school. When we have found out and we've decided what we think should happen to it, we are going to present what we have found out to a specific audience, which might be your local councillors or the local planning authority. So knowing from the outset who it is you are going to present the outcomes of your inquiry to, having a real audience in mind, can be really helpful in engaging the children in the whole process. And finally, whatever sort of an inquiry it is, whether it's fieldwork based or whether it's more use of secondary sources of some sort, we do need to evaluate what we have learnt and the process by which we learnt it, considering whether we could have done it better if we gone about it a different way, whether there's still gaps in what we know, what might come next. So that process, as I said, is much messier in real life than it is displayed there. But nonetheless, that's a good general guide to what the inquiry process in primary geography looks like. To you, Paula, for a very important part of the inquiry process.
Thank you, Julia. Yes, critical thinking has come up strongly across the whole curriculum, but of course it's extremely relevant in geography. And the Geographical Association has done a lot of work on this, working with schools. We did a whole programme under a government initiative a few years ago. This diagram is from the Geographical Association, and it's a straightforward way of thinking about what critical thinking actually means. And at its heart, there are three different ways of thinking. First of all, it's about becoming better at asking questions. So using that inquiry process to make sure that children understand that different kinds of questions will have different kinds of answers, and there are better questions than others for asking and seeking out evidence, knowing what kind of evidence you want to get. This bit about evaluating evidence is extremely important, especially in a world where we're bombarded by a lot of disinformation and fake news. So teaching children the skills to evaluate evidence and to be able to differentiate between fact and opinion is absolutely essential, thinking about sources. But also it's really key to think about different views. We must avoid telling that single story of place, that single story about people and places and environments. So other views are really important. And this is particularly relevant, of course, for climate change. So thank you, Anthony. Move on.
So turning to fieldwork now, I'm going to speak a little bit about progression in fieldwork. So as pupils move from early years to year 6, we can build in progression by working in increasingly unfamiliar environments, by asking increasingly more complex questions, linking directly back to Paula's last point, by using increasingly specific vocabulary to name and describe the features that children observe and investigate, and enjoy an increasingly sophisticated range of techniques to collect, analyse, evaluate and communicate geographical information and data. So if you just go to the next slide, please, Anthony. Right. I and a great many other colleagues in the early years and primary committee of the Geographical Association and in the wider primary geography community spent a great deal of time a few years ago trying to develop a progression framework for fieldwork experiences. So the article that's in the primary geography in spring 2021 is a accumulation of that 18-month project. And what it does is it creates framework of the sorts of experiences that you would want all children to have as they move from early years through to Key Stage 1 and then lower Key Stage 2 and upper Key Stage 2. And it identifies the sort of curriculum. If you could just go to the next slide, Anthony, there's a bit more detail there. Right. And it identifies the sort of opportunities that are in the curriculum for that age.
Yeah, I'm listening to a geography webinar, so yeah, multitasking. I'm marking and listening to a webinar.
and it lists the fieldwork techniques we think children should use at each stage. So that column on the right hand side, when you look at it is available in the article, PG article, it's a double page spread. You can see the range of techniques and skills that you would want children to have the opportunity to learn and develop and apply and practice in each of those age ranges. So that many people find that extremely helpful when they are planning to integrate fieldwork opportunities into their curriculum planning. If you could just do the next slide, please, Anthony. And some of you may be aware that during the summer, the GA published another very, very useful document called High Quality Geography Fieldwork for All. This is based on a lot of research undertaken by the GA. It brings together a lot of what's already previously been written about fieldwork in geography, and it includes some very interesting case studies of good practice from primary and secondary schools. And again, it is free to GA members, so you like the framework for progression in fieldwork experiences. If you're a GA member, you can download it for free from the website. Thank you, Anthony. And now I'm passing back to Paula to talk about another set of procedural skills in geography, mapping.
Thanks, Julia. Yes, and likewise, I've got some free resources to share with you from the Ordnance Survey. This was a progression in mapping document that was building on some seminal work by Simon Catling, who has written prolifically about mapping and understanding mapping. And this is a key disciplinary thinking skill for geographers to have, and is an essential part of the toolkit. So rather than having mapping separately, ideally woven into everything you do throughout the planning, and this document will give you some ideas as to about how and where you might be able to do that. There's a progression document, and next slide please, Anthony. This shows some year 1 children and some of the framework. If we go to the next slide, we can see an example. I've jumped up to year. It's very much a similar kind of format to the one Julia was just talking about in fieldwork, a similar kind of layout. So it's easy to see and grasp and kind of cherry pick which bits best fit with whatever you're teaching, so that when we think about the expectations, and you can see the difference in the mapping outcome here, some digital mapping as well as some hand practice mapping from years 5 and 6. There are some QR codes there to help you download it as well. And then if we go to the next slide, these are the 2 booklets that go further than just progression. There's some guidance for thinking about planning in the early years, because of course it's quite crucial. And I'm just going to say here as well, it's interesting that the reviews specifically mentioned the need to outline disciplinary thinking at Key Stage 3, but they didn't mention it in primary, and yet you don't just suddenly start using skills in Key Stage 3. So the implication there, as it ever has been, is that it's essential to think about how we build and equip children to think as geographers, to develop their geographical and disciplinary thinking from early years. So those 2 free to download. And I think that's me done for the moment. Thank you, Anthony.
And could you just go back for 1 second, Anthony? To Paula's last slide, thank you. Just to say that these 2 have been written by Paula, one for the early years and one for the primary years, and they're both incredibly useful and free to download from the Ordnance Survey website. There is a 3rd one actually, which is about secondary. It's been written by David Gardner. I know David is with us this afternoon, and his work on thinking has been very influential his work on progression has been very influential in the GA generally. He's been an author of quite a lot of work on progression. So I'll just say thank you, David, for all your work on that. Could we move on? Right. I mentioned Margaret Roberts earlier on, the titan of geography education thinking. And this diagram is based on her work, which is actually in a book called Inquiry in Geography, but it's aimed at secondary pupils and their teachers. But all of these sources are really important in primary geography as well. And one of the things that's incredibly important, if we think about media literacy, the whole idea of being media savvy and developing your skills in the critical use of sources, one of the most important things we need to think about is providing a very wide range of sources to avoid what is often called the single story. Many of you will be familiar with the idea of the single story, which is that children might learn about a place through one set of photographs and then forever believe that that place is only what they learned from that set of photographs. So it's really, really important in primary geography to have a multiplicity of sources, whatever you're learning about, wherever it is. It's really important to try to find as many different sources as you can. And this is a very exhaustive list by, well, I've adapted it from Margaret Roberts' original work, which is in her the second edition of a book published a couple of years ago. But all of these sources are really, really valuable for primary geography, depending on the particular inquiry you're doing. So I would just urge you to think about how many of these resources you currently use and where there might be opportunities to use some of the others as sources to enrich your geography learning and to inform children's geography learning. Thank you, Anthony. Back to Paula now.
I think we've actually done this point already, but just to mention this again, this need to make sure that we give children time to practice these skills rather than just doing it once. So that's absolutely key. And I didn't realise you were with us. I've just seen you, David. So yes, thank you, Julia, for saying that. I think you and John Hopkin and some other people at the GA and the work that you've done on the progression and assessment booklet has been particularly helpful for everyone in primary and secondary and above. So that's really grateful for that. And that's available in the shop if you're a member. I think there might be a free version of that to download as well. Thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, there is a free version of that to download, and there's a fairly recent version as well. So yes, thank you, David. Your work is very much acknowledged here at the primary level. Right, this is the expected timetable for the implementation of the new curriculum. As you know, the report has just been published. We are in the consultation period. I read somewhere, but cannot now find the source, that the new programmes of study are supposed to be produced by spring 26. And I do know tenders are out for that work, but I don't know any more detail than that. So I didn't put it on this slide because I wasn't absolutely certain of my source. But we do know that by spring 27, the new national curriculum documents will have been published. They will have been consulted on, and the final versions will be published then, giving schools a full 18 months to prepare and plan for the new national curriculum, which in my experience is a record long length of time to give schools time to do this properly. So that is our understanding, and it gives us all plenty of time to understand the detail and how the proposals in the review document that we've seen, many of which are still quite general, how they're going to turn into actual programmes of study and support for schools and teachers. So right at the end of this GeogLive, Paul and I are going to talk about some resources that already exist and some that are coming, which will support everybody, we hope, with thinking about curriculum review as we move forward into this period. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I hope that's been useful. Now handing over to my wonderful colleagues, Helen and Sharon.
Thank you, Julia and Paul. I think that's been lots and lots of useful information there and considerations for the new curriculum when we do see it. So, yep, absolutely, as Julia just said, over to Helen and Sharon, please.
Hi, everyone. Great to see so many people on the call. Thank you, Julia and Paula, for your inspiration. Sorry, of course, my cat wants to make an appearance on the webinar as usual. Sharon and I are going to just talk to you for almost 10 minutes to talk to you about a new resource that the Early Years and Primary Phase Committee are planning and almost publishing, which will be on our social media sites and will be a free resource. GeogLive is part of the Early Years and Primary Phase Committee, and their amazing 28 webinars are part of the work that have been done by the committee. What we have thought as our volunteer membership is that we would like to support colleagues in primary even further. So what we want to do is to choose one of those key concepts that Paula and Julia have just been talking about, and to gather a range of resources for you from the membership of our committee, of which there are a huge different select amount of people. So Anthony, if you wouldn't mind moving on, please. So we are a committee that include teachers, head teachers, lecturers, and consultant geographers. We meet 3 times a year. We're part of the GA as a volunteer, part of the membership. And it's a really important role for us to try and understand what teachers in schools need. Those are in teacher training, those of you who are in the classroom, and to be able to support you as much as possible. So we have 3 working parts of the work of the committee that are working all the time. One is GeogLive, one is our sort of issues or values team, thinking about what we need, and a curriculum document team, which is the group of people that are working on this new resource, which is a PowerPoint document, and that's what we're going to be starting to produce on a regular basis. Thank you, Anthony. So our role in EYPPC is Early Years and Primary Phase Committee is to lead with intention. We want to bring passion, commitment and enthusiasm to help for advocate for primary geography. We're all completely mad about what that does, not just for geography in classrooms, but for geography as a citizen geographer, as we were talking about climate change earlier on in the webinar, to help us and change us as people, and to help young people to have that direction and support and facilitation in their learning as geographers. So we work collaboratively, we embrace a broad definition of diversity, we always work in partnership with each other, and most importantly, we really want to hear from primary practitioners and find out what you need from us as a group working for advocating primary geography. And Sharon's going to ask you about that nearer the end of this presentation. We want to be curious and questioning. So all of our stuff tends to be very creative, very curious, and enable children to enhance those questions that we were talking about before. I'll pass to Sharon, who is our Vice Chair of EYPPC. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks, Anthony, for moving the slides on. So underpinning our work as EYPPC, we see primary geography as nurturing primary learners to be naturally curious, spatially aware, globally connected, deeply concerned and critically engaged. Thank you, Anthony. Next slide, please. And as you've heard, we look at the big ideas of geography concepts, and just to say we're all sort of singing from the same song sheet. We're focusing in on geographical concepts, of which Paula suggested there are many, with some of them being scale, place and space. And Ofsted in 2023 suggested that we needed to embed these in our curriculum to promote that interconnectedness and to enhance the deeper understanding of the subject. Thank you, Anthony. So our first resource is going to focus on place. Thanks, Anthony. And we want to share ideas that place is complex, place is more than location, that places tell stories and that geography is a story. So this is the idea that place is dynamic, and we hope that lots of our activities will help to promote that idea. Thank you, Anthony. And I rather like this quote from Alice Fowler. We tell stories and draw maps to make sense of who we are, where we are and why we are. We make sense of our whole world, the immediate, intimate and wider one, through stories. Thank you, Anthony. And of course, as Julia was hinting, we're moving away from single stories. There's so many different stories of complexity that are multi-layered, a plurality of voices and a tapestry of experiences. Thank you, Anthony. So Helen, over to you.
Thank you. So within this this piece of work that we're working on at the moment, ready to publish for anybody to use free, we obviously want to pick up on place. We want to ensure that we are meeting the requirements of the national curriculum and the national curriculum to come. And it aims to support teachers' curriculum planning with ideas, thoughts and activities. So we won't be producing plans, but we will be producing ideas and concepts, and we're going to show you a couple of those in a minute. That may just deepen your subject knowledge, broaden the experiences, and also enable you to take in the needs of your locality and, most importantly, the children in your classrooms. Thank you. So we intend to post this new resource by a blog, alongside a blog post, which actually we really want to be as provocative in our thinking about primary geography as we can, and enable those of you who are primary practitioners to become engaged in some of that dialogue. And hearing about what you need in your classrooms is really important to us. Thank you. If you just move on to the next one, Anthony, that'd be great. So these are my ideas. So each of the committee members have put together one slide or a couple of slides with some ideas. Those of you who know me, Nell won't be surprised to hear that this is very Forest School. I'm also a Forest School practitioner, and a lot of the work that I do likes placing children in that place. How do they feel about it? As Paula mentioned before, providing an emotion as well as knowledge. So however small, quiet or overgrown your playground might be, or noisy it might be, or just outside your school grounds, these ideas from myself in this PowerPoint presentation are just about bringing children into that place and enabling them just to feel it. We know that just by being out in nature, what it does for the mental health of all of us, not just the young people that we are supporting, but everybody in your team working with your class in their geography learning. So these are a range of ideas that I've crammed onto one PowerPoint, really enabling children to become curious about their environment. And this is just one of the examples of the slides that we will be cramming ideas to be open to colleagues in the classroom. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, and this activity is one of mine, an activity to pay attention in fieldwork spaces to what's happening in the moment. Like many of the activities that will be in our pack, there will be little expense. You can do them in the school grounds, in a park, in a woodland, or as these Year 4 children did, on a beach. And it's an activity which encourages children to think about who catches and holds their attention when they're out in the fieldwork space, who or what is on the move, what stories are here, and can the children get involved with perhaps some informal mapping too. So here we have them telling stories of boats and tides and birds and spiders and seagulls and dogs. So lots of paying attention, of observing and recording and communicating the stories of place. Thank you, Anthony. So the blog and the resource, we're very excited, will be coming soon to you all. And we'd love to hear in the chat what themes or concepts you would like support with, so that then perhaps we can direct our attention to another area that responds to your need. Thank you very much, Julia and Paula, for the opportunity for EYPPC curriculum group to share our resource. And we'll make sure that we make it aware when it's ready for the classroom. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen and Sharon. I think that looks like a really useful resource. So hopefully it'll reach a lot of people when it's being produced. So passing it over then to Steve, who's going to talk to us about primary geography.
Okay, those of you that are members will have already received this wonderful edition that's just come out. If you're not a member, this hopefully will just encourage you to become a member. The autumn edition is all about preparing us for the future using the tools that are currently available to us, and even looking into the future of what else might be available. So we've got a whole range of articles that explores various aspects of the future that faces us. I do hope you like the diagram on the cover. We've got articles about how we can actually look at climate change, which we all regard as a challenging topic at primary level, and how VR and AR and AI may help us explore that. We've looked at Indigenous, we've got an article in uses Indigenous knowledge and how we can look into the future by looking at the wisdom of the past. Some of us may be struggling a little bit to incorporate STEAM into our approaches. So we have an article that looks at how a sensory garden project can incorporate many science, technology, engineering, arts and maths approaches in the whole concept of looking at the STEAM approach, and how that may encourage children to make appropriate future decisions about the world around them. Digital landscapes are becoming increasingly important for us to explore. So Ollie Goldstone explores a particular learning platform for that. One of the highlights of the issue is an interview with Sophia Robot. She is Hanson Robotics' most advanced and celebrated AI-powered human-like robot. And she has addressed the United Nations General Assembly, hosted a NATO summit, and is part of an ongoing AI research in human robotics interaction. She took time out of a very busy schedule to reflect on our theme of futuristic geographies, which I think you'll find quite fascinating. We've looked at indoor-outdoor integrated framework through Dawn Thomas's article, and Jane Whittle has looked at Tech and Talk, where she explores the potential of digital technology to strengthen connections between geography and oracy skills. And then finally, I think a lot of us have had to pay a great deal of attention to digital inequality and safety, and Simon Collis has produced a very reflective think piece that shares current statistics about being safe online and ways schools may be grappling with this in the classroom and at policy level. So I can't recommend the issue enough to you, and I hope that you'll join the GA, if only just to get that journal. However, Anthony, if you go on, there's a lot more that you get from joining the GA, and that is obviously access to all the curriculum packs, etc. that we've got here, which you can buy through the shop at a vast discount. And if you go to the next slide, Anthony, there are also the primary geography CPD packs, which again are available to you. So joining the GA gives you all sorts of advantages. And the last slide, Anthony. And the next issues of primary geography that are coming up, and we have planned up to the summer of 2027, include colourful geography, sticky geography, I like the sound of that one, senses of geography, geography outdoors, and inclusive geography. So I hope you'll feel it's worthwhile joining the GA to be able to have access to those journals. Okay, thank you, Anthony.
Okay, thanks everybody. So just to reiterate that we have, well, this is GeogLive 29, so we have 28 other hours worth of webinars which you can find on YouTube. So please do have a look. We've covered a whole range of different subjects, different topics, including the ones you can see on screen, fieldwork, early years, all different aspects. So please do go and have a look at those. And hopefully you will find some really useful guidance and ideas there as well. And then we've just got some other sources that Steve's just been talking about as well. So we have a whole range of different resources that you can buy through the Geographical Association, which also are really supportive in planning and teaching your geography lessons. So if you look at geography.org.uk/shop, you can find all of those different sources there as well. And we've got our annual conference coming up in April next year at Sheffield College on the city campus. So we do have tickets available at the moment. There'll be a lot of the Early Years and Primary Phase Committee presenting. We've been told about our sessions now, so you'll find a lot of us there and presenting new ideas. GeogLive will also have a session there, I believe, on the 10th. But I think the final timetable is being confirmed. But do have a look at that on the GA's website as well. So have a look through that QR code to find out more about the conference.
Kate, could I just say something before we move on?
Yep.
The resources that were listed just before this conference, that's right, those three. All of these are already available, and those are paid for resources which members can buy. There are a lot more coming in light of the curriculum review. I think Paula could say something about what's coming on the CPD packs. Paula, are you still there? Yes,
I am still here. Thank you, Julia. First of all, I'd just like to say that these ones are very recent and they are all absolutely stunning. If I just pick one, for example, Ben recently won an award for his one on diversity and difference, very relevant to the curriculum. You mentioned diversity has come through quite strongly. Inquiring critical thinking by somebody, I believe, is there as well, and that's mentioned. All of these relate back to the curriculum. We've got a maths one in the pipeline. We've got one on understanding a key geographical skill and understanding of graphicacy coming from Margaret McIntosh, and we've got some on climate change as well. So lots to look forward to, and I'll be coming up very soon to support you.
Thank you, Paula.
And can I also say that just as Helen said, that the new resource produced by EYPPC is free to anybody, not restricted to GA members. That's the same for GeogLive. GeogLive is free for anybody, and we very much hope those of you who've been here today will promote it and tell your colleagues about it. Anybody can download it from our YouTube website and look at it at their convenience. Thank you, Kate. Sorry to interrupt.
Thanks, Julie. No problem. Anthony, did you want to just refer back to the blog again?
Just a final coda. Thanks for amazing contributions, but we'd like you to take part in the feedback for everybody. So please do use the chat now. And if you're happy to be quoted in your feedback on the session, do put something in the chat now. That could be some general feedback or could be a contribution that you could make to the discussions and the insights that have been given today. So have a reflective moment, have a moment to think about what you've seen and heard. And we'd really love you to put something in the chat that when we put a blog together that will go alongside the recording of this session, then we can kind of integrate your voice, your contribution to what we've shared today, because this is a collaborative effort, as you can tell, with the range of voices that we've given today, range of different perspectives that we've given, but we'd love to have the people who are actually here live on the day have their voice shared as well. So any feedback, any contributions, any thoughts and insights that you've got that can connect to any of the things that have been shared today, please do use the chat. If you want to help me write it, or if you want to write it yourself, please do drop me an email. We'd love to have you to contribute, because we are always looking for people to kind of join the network community. It's a really wonderful sharing space for us that's beyond our place of work, and we really do find a lot of solace and support with each other there. So opportunity to contribute. The chat's open now. Do please add something there.
Thanks, Anthony. So thank you all for attending. Hopefully you found some really useful guidance in our presentations this afternoon. We've got some really positive feedback in the chat. So thank you to all of our speakers. And our next GeogLive will be in January. So we'll see you all then. So thank you very much.